Never bad.
Never bad.
All right, we are live. At least on Facebook we are. Let's see about YouTube and Periscope. Periscope hasn't been working lately, so it's possible that we won't it just isn't in the cards for us to stream to Periscope for the time being, which is fine because Periscope is disappearing.
I was going to say, would you believe that I don't even know what Periscope is, barely?
It's the streaming platform for like Twitter? On Twitter. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so let's share this stream out. What are you going to say?
No, I was just, as we're starting up here, most people consume the show live. So really, once we get it recorded and start putting out in podcast form, it won't be such a big deal. But I always have things I'm just bursting at the seams to talk about once we get started. And if you're consuming the show live, unless you go back and watch it later, you're gonna miss them. So I thought about having a little segment called Stevie Boy's premature release. For just something that came to mind. I just can't help but just let go of what I want to get off my chest, and actually combined sort of with the other running segment that we've had, which is there's always something I forget to say on the last show. So it's, Stevie Boy's moment of regret. So today's sort of a combination of those two long-term segments. But before I forget, thank you for our sponsors, Mudwater. Don't forget to go to mudwater.com and use promo code whitemail, as we've talked about. But last show, I think I joined late, and we were talking about, you were talking about just neo-reactionary as a movement. And I thought it kind of ironic that, the whole thing is sort of about power dynamics and kind of having a broader understanding of, the scope of history and the whole bit. And yet they name themselves like the two words that automatically sound like they should be banned. And then they put them together. Does that strike? You know what I mean?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Kind of interesting. Because does anything I don't know. I'm trying to think neo hippie is a kind of an innocuous, but I can't think of anything that neo really sets you up at the very least. And then you throw a reactionary in there and that's just always bad.
Well, see, what's funny is I wonder how many people actually know what reactionary means. How many people, how many people have any sort of a connotation or association with that? I kind of didn't. When I first encountered neo-reactionary, I was like, okay, well, I know what neo means, but I have no idea what reactionary means. So what does it mean to be a reactionary, apart from reacting? But what are the characteristics of someone who is reacting?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if anybody else out there has the same. I don't know. Just put in the comments. Tell us if you know what reactionary means. If you're someone who isn't already familiar with NRX thought to begin with, someone who isn't already steeped in the culture.
It means. I think a neo-reactionary would tell you it means whatever they decide that it means. But
one of the things that I have, one thing I would like to discuss with someone who is more steeped in the neo-reactionary literature than I would be what part of their criticism of mainstream conservatism or even libertarianism. Their critiques are kind of different of the two, but primarily mainstream conservatism. One of their critiques is that their only policy position in effect is whatever is the opposite of whatever the left says. Kind of. So it's like they don't really actually have really much of a coherent identity. They just try to oppose whatever the left does. But they're trying to keep the peace. So ultimately, eventually, it just means that they're in the long run, they're embracing whatever the left does. But so what distinguishes a reactionary from that? Because a reactionary is someone that's reacting. If you're reacting, then by definition, you're allowing the other to act first and kind of set the terms, and then you're reacting to them. So I wonder what would distinguish a reactionary from a conservative in that sense, or perhaps that's why they're neo-reactionary. But then, if the old one was bad, then what makes the new one not bad?
That's another thing. If I may, if I complain about nothing and offer no solutions, we'll call it Stevie Boy's libertarian moment.
Yeah, we're giving you guys. If you're libertarian, you got to expect to be a punching bag if you show up here. And it's not because we don't like libertarians; it's because we hate libertarians.
He almost had you. Remember to unsubscribe and don't bother Matthew Erickson with any of your fucking nonsense if he doesn't want to hear it. Oof, man, that caught me right off guard. That was good. Yeah. What if? What about order? Just like if they're just a fan of order, reactionaries. I kind of reread a little bit of Mulbug's Carlyle stuff yesterday, so it's fresh on my mind.
Which is
the
phenomenal.
First little bit. Oh yeah. It really is good. It actually brought me up to this is where I derail you from whatever it is that you wanted to talk about today. But when kind of talking about how like we've said several times before here, libertarians have appropriately identified the ideal society, but the solutions that they're proposing do not work to get us there. It works at this special segment where you're basically very close to like an ideal society, which is why basically any libertarians we're talking to appear to be very moral people. A lot of them are Christian, or just have some sort of underlying morality, which is why, in the dawn of the apocalypse, those are the people that were all just like, hey, you want to move to Idaho together? Maybe. Think about it. And it's not like the crew who is taking selfies with like BLM and whatever all summer. There's a reason for that, and it's because there's like a whole progression of getting to the point of some sort of ideal libertarian society, which he describes as spontaneous order. And he moved through a whole progression, which I don't exactly recall, but basically you start with a time where you're in war. So you want to move away from war to peace, and then from peace to help me out, maybe lawfulness.
Peace to let me look it up. You keep going, and I'll look it up.
Yeah, so it's this whole progression, which Matthew is going to detail for you here in just a moment. But it's not just 1, 2, 3, and Capistan, right? Which again, if I just may say, a bunch of people who never stop talking about time preference. It's amazing to think that just Ancapistan is just going to happen just like that with no specific. We'll just open the borders and everything will be great. There's an order and there's a progression to even thinking about getting to a free society. So what it made me think of is Matthew, and I would ask him if I call him Matthew. I think at this point, it's safe to say I can call him Matthew.
Still yes.
With his child, right? Because this whole progression is okay. Move away from war. Have law and order. Then, okay, now that you have law and order, everything's kind of in balance, and we're just going to let go. We're going to let go and let the society function as it needs to. If there's an increase in crime, we've got to stop it. We're going to adjust it as required. But you need, if the flaw in libertarianism is not identifying that progression, I'm interested to see what about the critiques of the process, because where do you find in nature some entity that has a vested interest in preventing crime, and then that moment of letting go? And it just made me think of young Matthew with his son at the point where he begins to walk, and Matthew's there with the baby. This is why my hands have been like this. I've been envisioning it, right? And he's like, okay, son, go off into the world. Okay, you're balanced now. In just that moment of letting go. I'm going to catch you if you need it. Okay, I'm going to let go again. We haven't seen in our lifetime, in our experience with governments, in ones that we've observed and lived through, we haven't seen that impulse to ever relinquish any kind of control whatsoever. So that was my thought in looking at the Carlyle stuff recently, which probably is nothing that you wanted to talk about at all today.
No, it's actually it's related. That's kind of like
you can find a segue.
Yeah,
if I know one thing about Matty, he can find a segue. I tell you.
Well, that's kind of the whole thing that undergirds everything that we're talking about is how societies move, how cultures move, the direction that they move, what causes them to move, and how can we use that understanding to either just try to insulate ourselves from it, or have some impact on it, have some sort of influence on it. And that's basically kind of the gist of, we're trying to look for like a one or two line like quick phrase that just describes the show that we could put in an intro, so that someone who shows up and like listens for the first time, they're like, hey, what are these guys talking about? And you got some pithy little thing. That's the long version of it. We need to try to make that pithy. But Stephen has suggested
God and fuck libertarians. Intro. Done.
T-shirt. That's going on a T-shirt. Anyways, okay. So welcome aboard, people here. We're king-pilled. This is our deal, and we're very casual about this. I mean, we've got a YouTube channel that we stream to, and we've been doing it for a couple of months, and we don't even have a logo yet. So we're just gonna come here and show up and talk. And if you guys like it, then stick around, and if you don't, then go away. And you know, we don't really care how many people are talking to us, as long as they all agree with us and tell us that we're right about everything. Because our goal is to create an echo chamber. So if this is your first time watching, then welcome. Please agree with us, and if you don't, then we don't care. Do us a favor and throw a like on the video, and you know, do something. Click something. Go around, click something. Like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel. Go follow us on Twitter, Matt @RealKingPilled and Steven @Messina Inc. I'm very frustrated that as of last I checked, Steven has not changed his name on Twitter to Liberal Steve. So he's not staying true to his brand, and that's frustrating to me. But you know, we'll figure out a way around here. So
boy, will we.
So back to what you were saying. I found the thing from Moldbug here. He says, basically, this is if you're a libertarian and you want to get a good intro, like if you're already a libertarian, you're already someone who's familiar with Mises, Rothbard, Hayek, you know, I mean, that eliminates a lot of libertarians. But the ones who are left, if you want to understand kind of the basis for where we're coming from and the Moldbugian view of the world, then go to his blog, Unqualified Reservations, and look up the series From Mises to Carlyle, because that will really describe to you part of the issue with the neo-reactionary Moldbugian view of the world is, on its face, libertarians tend to have a very, even in conservatives, you know, cultural or constitutional conservatives have a strong reaction to it. It on its face, it seems to propose a bunch of it seems to prescribe actions and view of the world that ostensibly fly directly in the face of libertarianism. But if you read From Mises to Carlyle, you'll understand why, if you value libertarianism, this is the roadmap to it. If we're ever going to get there, it's going to be this way, because libertarianism it's a great philosophy. But Moldbug makes one really good comparison. He says that it's kind of like Newtonian mechanics. Within a specific frame, it seems like everything's all fine and dandy, all hunky-dory. It's great. You know, look at it. Yeah, everything works. I plug this in. I get that out. Everything seems to work just fine. But if you exit that frame, then suddenly it's basically useless. And so it's a matter of getting us to that point. It's a matter of getting us to the point where the libertarian ideal or the libertarian view of the world can be realized. And in order to get there, you have to understand how we got here. Because if you can understand how we got here, you'll understand where we're going. And that's historical cycles is what I wanted to talk about today. I called the show The Fourth Turning, History's Rhymes, and What's Different Now. And History's Rhymes is a reference to the saying. It said that, I don't remember who said it, but he said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And so that's where I wanted to talk about today. So this quote here that Stephen was referring to is from part 1 of Moldbug's From Mises to Carlyle, My Sick Journey. And let me see how much context I need to give here. I think that I'll just start here. To a Misesian, the struggle of good and evil, so plainly displayed by history, is the struggle between tyranny and freedom. Evil is tyranny. Good is freedom. As we've seen, there are problems with this perspective. Its main problem, however, is that it must obscure the difference between left and right, which is clearly significant and qualitative. If the left-right axis does not exist, why does everyone see it? If it does exist, the up-down axis gets scraped right off by Occam's razor. With one axis, do we need two? To a Carlylean, the main event is the struggle between left and right, which is the struggle between good and evil, which is the struggle between order and chaos. Evil is chaos. Good is order. Evil is left. Good is right. Evil is fiction. Good is truth. Gentlemen, there is no other road. The facts, it's true, are stones between our teeth. Shall we chew these stones? If not now, when? Note that if we find a way to make this theory work, we completely explain the Misesian perspective. Mises becomes, as promised, a subset of Carlyle. Freedom is good because freedom is fundamentally orderly, i.e., right wing. Tyranny is evil because tyranny is chaotic, i.e., left wing. Tyranny is one form of chaos. Freedom is one form of order. There are others of each, of course, or however, and order is always preferred to chaos. Thus, to a Carlylean, the fatal error of libertarianism is the confusion of anarchy and freedom. Yes, not only are they not the same thing, they are opposite poles of the political spectrum.
Go off, Queen.
Freedom, spontaneous order, is the ultimate form of order. Anarchy is the ultimate form of disorder. To a Carlylean, anarchy and tyranny are fundamentally and essentially allied and indivisible. And again, the apparent affinity between anarchy and freedom is wholly illusory. In fact, to maximize freedom, eradicate anarchy. To achieve spontaneous order, first, achieve ordinary, down-to-earth, non-spontaneous order. Then wait a while, then start to relax. Here is the Carlylean roadmap for the Misesian goal. Spontaneous order, also known as freedom, is the highest level of a political pyramid of needs. These needs are peace, security, law, and freedom. To advance order, always work for the next step without skipping steps. In a state of war, advance toward peace. In a state of insecurity, advance toward security. In a state of security, advance toward law. In a state of law, advance toward freedom. This is the observation. This is the mold buggy, and obviously a Carlylean. He's just borrowing. Nobody's introducing new ideas. They're just repackaging and recombining old ideas. And here
we are here to repackage those repackaged ideas for you fine people.
Exactly. And eventually, if we're good enough at this, then someone will repackage our repackaged ideas. So this is the advance of human evolution, human societal evolution, which is actually, this is exactly the tweet thread that I did last night, was describing that process, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So this right here, these I know 6 paragraphs or something that I just read is just like, I want to just stamp it on my forehead.
Isn't it perfect?
It is one of the most perfect things ever written. And it's going to be, if you're coming from a libertarian perspective, I guarantee, because I've been coming from a libertarian perspective. Up until this point, I would have considered myself an anarcho-capitalist. And I would still consider myself an anarcho-capitalist. That's the goal. That's what I want to work toward. But I understand that to get to that, it takes what he's describing here. And I know that I just triggered all the ANCAPs because they're going to be like, oh, you can't believe that. Yeah, like I said, echo chamber, please. Echo chamber. If you don't agree, we don't care. We're just here to listen to ourselves talk.
You and I, well, me specifically, I don't know if you ever got kicked out, but did we get kicked out? I got kicked out of a group made of ANCAPs, presumably for celebrating when there was a story of some of the rioters getting picked up by like a secret van or something along those lines. I think I posted the Fozzie Bear and Kermit in the van, like GIF or something like GIF.
Yes, on this podcast we say GIF.
Yeah, I always said GIF, and then I found out that that's how you really say it, and now I'm just such a contrarian asshole that I'm saying GIF by accident. It's just coming from me naturally. But so like the little dancing guys in the van, and it was me and Matthew giving rides to the rioters or something like that.
I remember
like,
that.
that whole group was so upset, because it's like, just like, well, next it can happen to libertarians, and it's just like, oh wow, that's pretty deep stuff. I never thought of that, man. And I did it. A authoritarian regime can kind of expand who it fucks with. It's like, it's just, but no, like I said before, it's like that thing the lawyer said to me. You have to deal with the bear in front of you. It's like the streets are on fire, man. It's like, where the fuck do you think you're gonna get to in Kapistan when your goddamn streets are on fire? It doesn't matter who's violating your fucking natural rights.
Right.
Do you
exactly.
Care? Like, and that's actually in the article. And another thing that's in the article, or article essay, whatever it is, before I forget, is he talks about, and this is like near and dear to my heart, the whole idea with like anarchy. I think libertarians just like saying the word anarchy and feeling a little dangerous. That's right. I've always had that as just sort of an underlying just hunch. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, I understand. It's just like if you go to like the Greek word of it kind of means this, or it's like, we know what anarchy means, and what it means to most people is just kind of destruction and disorder. And if you get too wrapped up in that, he actually says that because of conflating the ideas of anarchy and freedom and the fact that they're opposites, libertarians will attract people who get in the way of actual freedom.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know where we could have seen that recently.
It's the thing is with your words, like you said, this with all the Greek word, blah 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 blah. Yeah, it doesn't matter what the definition of it is. What matters is how it's used, and what matters is the emotional response that it creates, or that it evokes in someone when they hear it. If you want to redefine the language, you have to have any sort of influence over it. You have to have some sort of control over it. And I can't really think of a less influential or less relevant body of people in the world than libertarians. It's just, I mean, I don't think an honest libertarian would admit the same thing to them himself. Like it's just, the world is just about as far from libertarian as we could possibly get. It's just, nobody values what libertarians say in any way at all. So you don't get to define the language. The language is defined for you. If you want to redefine the way people understand the words that you say, you have to first achieve some level of influence and control over the conversation. And the way you do that is through wealth and power. And so libertarianism appropriately, if you're going to get, like, I think that probably the best thing for libertarians to do is just not get involved in politics at all. Like, you need to lay the foundation. You need to lay the groundwork before you try to get involved in it. Like, you've got to have money, you've got to have influence, you've got to have a high profile, you've got to have some sort of leverage over the culture to do anything in politics, really. Until then, you're like a gnat attached to the backside of a rampaging hippopotamus, and you're just not going to have any control over it. Unless you decide, okay, well, instead of trying to solve all the world's problems right now, I'm just going to solve the problem right in front of me. And if the way to solve that problem is to get involved in politics, then I'll get involved in politics and solve that problem. And I'll do whatever is necessary in that moment to solve that problem. And then I'll solve the next problem that comes to me. Kevin here says, go ahead.
Yeah, no, to that end, I just want to encourage everybody. I think it would be a fascinating conversation, but two people that probably anyone listening to this would know, but Vin Armani offered to debate Dave Smith about the utility or lack thereof of getting involved with, Libertarian Party politics in general. And at the very least, I think it would be a fascinating discussion. So, I mean, if anyone's out there, if you can do anything to encourage that happening, retweet Vin's tweet or whatever, or message Dave to encourage it, but it was going to be on Lions of Liberty. I think it would be a fantastic conversation. Absolutely. I just think there'd be a lot of great ideas that were revealed there. But I just wanted to put that out there while you're talking about politics.
Right. And I should be clear that I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that that libertarians should not get involved in politics, but I do think that if you're going to get involved in politics, your goal shouldn't be we're going to abolish the state or whatever. If you're going to get involved in politics, you need to have a coherent, effective political message, something that can actually accomplish real policy goals. And as you know, if you're like, oh, well, your real policy doesn't matter, it's futile, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, then don't get involved in politics. I have no problem with that. I think that you're better off not getting involved in politics. But if you're going to, then don't get involved in politics to be Mr. Both Sides. To be like, well, both sides are equally bad. Or, Trump wasn't actually about the free market. You just like
Order.
get out of the way. Stay out of the way of people who are actually trying to accomplish something. The Kevin here said Academic Agent just did a video series on how libertarianism is the handmaidens for socialists. Yes, that's a very good series. I've only seen part of it, but I know the part that I've seen was enough that I want to see the whole thing. But I remember the syllogism that he created is he said that libertarianism creates degeneracy, degeneracy creates socialism, therefore libertarians create socialism. And this is a Machiavellian way of looking at the world, recognizing the real effects of real actions rather than the hypothetical effects of perceived actions or whatever. So, yeah, Magoo says, I'd imagine that would be the death blow toward Dave's takeover push. I think that conversation would be very revealing, and I kind of have my doubts that Dave will take that conversation on for precisely that reason. I think that he's pot committed in the direction that he's going. And honestly, from a PR standpoint, that would probably be a smart move. It would probably be a smart move to not engage in that conversation at all, unless he thinks that he can win that debate, and I don't think he can. So yeah, I think that I think Ven's perspective is very, very difficult to debate. It's very difficult to disagree with. I don't completely agree. I don't want to say that I think he's wrong necessarily, but I do have some of my issues with some of the stuff he said, and I'd be really curious to see how he responds to that. And he's already agreed to come on our show at some point here in the future, so we're going to get him on and we're going to have a conversation about some of that.
And you also have you can't underestimate just what it is to deal with a man who doesn't really want to wear a shirt talking mystically at you. You know what I mean? There's a lot to deal with there.
Yeah. And yeah, again, there you go. You don't get to decide the way that people take your appearance. You have to accept that people are going to take your appearance or your messaging or the way that you your brand is really what it is, the way that you appear to the world. You don't get to decide that. You have to recognize the actual effects that your brand will have on people that encounter it, and then you can accept that. And once you've accepted that, then you can start trying to tweak it and you can play with it in some ways. So that's like, for me, one thing that I like to do is I like this dynamic where I come off often as kind of like a hippie. I don't do it quite as much anymore because I don't wear all the floral stuff that I did for a while, but I like this thing where I've got this big beard and I've got this long curly hair and come off as like someone looking at me would expect that I'd be like a total hippie environmentalist or something like that. But then when people listen to me talk, I have this like really radically right-wing take. I like creating that conflict or that dissonance, and I do that intentionally.
I was going to tell so we're setting up the I remember I told you I was going to save it. I was going to tell you about yourself. So when we do the pre-show, we're setting up, the audio and everything like that. And I'm over here like a complete fucking Dago boiling pasta, buckwheat pasta though, speaking of hippies though, which is fucking disgusting. I'm ashamed to my ancestors. But Matt's over here, he's got no shirt. And I'm looking at him with all his like body hair and his curls and the beard and the whole thing. And I was just like looking at him and I'm like, man, when it comes to the question of just like, do you eat meat? There are only two answers that Matthew can provide, and they are very far away from each other. It is either, meat is murder. I don't eat any animal products, this, that, and the third, or yeah, all of it raw. I just go out and I just fucking tackle an elk and just bite it in the neck. There's no, like, Matthew is not like, well, I try to limit it to like just Mondays and Wednesdays where I'll eat meat, but I, mostly fish. No, it's either one or the other based on how Matthew looks, if I may call it that. And that was my thought as you were setting up the video with in all your glory.
That's funny. Yeah,
I like that. I like that the visual, in many ways contrasts the audio.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because to me at least, I think it kind of gets people's attention. It makes it
It's more
gives
interesting.
more staying power. Like if you have something about yourself that's provocative or unusual that stands out, you're better off leaning into it. You're better off really emphasizing it. I was just watching a documentary the other day with Amy. It's called Far from the Tree, and it was this guy who set out on this course to try to I think he wrote a book, but he went and interviewed a bunch of people who had children who did not turn out the way their parents expected them to. So he was gay, and his parents didn't they didn't disown him, but they made it very clear that they were not happy at all about him being gay. And then he talks to people whose parents or parents whose children got really sick, or children with autism or Down syndrome, or people who like a guy who murdered someone, or there's a whole bunch of different things where it's like they have to live with the consequences of this unique thing about them. And one of them was I call it a little girl. She was a little person, and she was completely like proportional and everything with her body, so she just looked like a really, really small scale person. And she was like, I don't know, late 20s or something like that, and she was probably the size of an 8 or 10-year-old maybe. And you could tell that she was perfectly capable. She was just small. She didn't have any other issues really. She just was just small. But she was very kind of weepy and timid and insecure and very much leaning in. She was very much like horrified of her own perceived disability. And I told Amy as we were watching it, I was like, if this girl owned it, if she was like, hell yeah, I'm tiny, I'll fuck up your kneecaps or something. She just totally embraced who she was. She would rule every room that she walked into, because people wouldn't know how to react to her. They wouldn't know how to relate. It's kind of like they kind of like, okay, well, I feel like I need to treat you with kid gloves, pardon the pun. And but then she's like, screw you, like I own my life, I'm a boss bitch, or whatever. If she acted that way, then she would take control of every situation she was in. But she didn't. She was very timid, and so for that reason, she was kind of sickly, and I think a lot of it, kind of getting off track here, but I think a lot of it came from her mom. Her mom was very overbearing and very much treated her like I have a child with a disability, and I need to go above and beyond to take care of my child with a disability. And I think that really poisoned her daughter's mind. There's so much you can get into that. So much you can unpack there about the nature of human psychology and how our own self-talk affects us, and how our environment affects us, and how our literal physical health and development can change depending on how people treat us. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
So what happened to you where you're such a goddamn hippie?
I have no idea. This is not how I grew up, like very conservative Christian, super nerdy, like a button-up t-shirt like tucked into cargo shorts. Like that was like kind of the way that I grew up. I was very much
all right, I'm
nothing
getting
even
Amy
close
to give me
to
pictures.
hippie.
I'm getting Amy to give me pictures.
I was super skinny when I graduated high school. When I entered high school in 10th grade, I was 6'1", 135 pounds, I think.
I knew you were taller than I thought.
twig.
You're one of those deceptively tall people. You're one of, aren't you? You're one of those people that people don't realize that you're tall until like after.
I don't know.
Like
someone has to tell me.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm 6'1". But I've been 6'1" since I was 14. 14, done. Didn't grow again. But anyways, okay, we got completely sidetracked there. But that was fun.
What we're saying is that libertarians are fucking morons, because
buy the t-shirt. Phil here, he says, I'm sympathetic to ANCAP philosophy, but there's no use in arguing for strawberries as a breakfast side on an island with only apples and pears. Very, very good analogy. That's why I said something about that last. I think I said something about like Chipotle and McDonald's or something last week, but that's exactly what I'm saying. It's totally fine to say this is what you prefer, but that's not on the menu. That's not an option. It's not available right now. If you want it to be, then you can create it. But that's a completely different question than, what would it be like if it existed? it's one thing to hypothesize about a libertarian future. It's another thing to create it. And if you read this From Mises to Carlyle by Moldbug, it'll give you a really good picture of, it's like a lay of the land. It's what we have around us, what we have to work with. So if you're using the meal analogy, it's kind of like, okay, what are our ingredients? What are the ingredients we have? What sort of cooking utensils do we have? What kind of stove are we working with? What's the outside environment? Is it windy? Are we outside somewhere? Are we in a nice kitchen? That's the Mises to Carlyle. If you want his actual prescription, his like, here's the meal that you should cook, and here's what it should taste like, and here's how you should serve it, then read his other series called Patchwork. That's where he actually gives a kind of a working hypothetical example of what the world would look like in his ideal reality. It's very, very good. It's definitely going to challenge a lot of your preconceptions, most likely, but I think that you'll come away from it finding it very compelling. At least I did. So, okay, good. The Chipotle analogy was hilarious. That's good. I'm glad. See, I like it when you tell me that I'm right about stuff. If you tell me that I'm right about stuff, then I'll be happy and I'll do a better show. So
it can also tell us that our species has been operating on the basis of geographic monopolies of sovereignty for roughly the last 50 million years, i.e. since the first tree rat pissed on the first tree branch. Perhaps we could hire some chimpanzees to experiment with multiple overlapping protection agencies to get back to us on that. Or we could hire the blue dragons from Neptune. But basically, it's the same. It's what he was. The metaphor I think that they chose were the blue dragons on Neptune. So the idea of just like, a completely stateless society, can it exist? It's like, well, we don't know if it can exist because we've been doing this monopolies on geographic sovereignty thing forever. We don't know if there's blue dragons on Neptune. We'd have to figure that out. But until we know that, it's the same. It's just it's his analogy in keeping with the Chipotle analogy and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, I love the way that he writes. He's very, very wordy, but every word is.
Yeah, I like how he writes too. He's a dickhead.
Oh yeah, he's a total dick. But like every word has a purpose, and it's very colorful. It really paints a picture, and it really guides you through his thought process. You can understand how he reasoned to these things, and he's also I've never seen someone who reads as much as he does. I have my issues with him. There's stuff that he says and stuff that I don't agree with, and he's made some prescriptions that I definitely don't agree with. But in terms of his caliber as a scholar, he's easily as well read and prolific as like Murray Rothbard. Absolutely, right. And he's easily the same level of like a generational scholar. Actually, we could probably get him on this. He says that he loves to do small shows. He wants to do shows of people that don't have much of an audience.
Well, motherfucker, you are in luck.
Yeah, just don't expect to get a word in edgewise.
Yeah, it'd be funny, me and you just talk over Yarvin the whole time. And he just starts to say something, and I just go, just to try to talk over him. I do his shit. He's like, shut up, Curtis.
Well, you know what's interesting? We're totally like, we keep deviating from what we were going to talk about. I guess this is what happens when we talk in the middle of the afternoon as opposed to at night. But One thing that I realized as I was listening to him, a lot of people, they like give him shit for the way that he talks, that he's a better writer than talker. And he definitely is a better writer than talker. Although as he's been doing this interview circuit, he's gotten a lot better. He's definitely not he's still awkward to listen to, but he's not quite as agonizing as he was once upon a time. But
he's making it hot like that little girl.
Right.
Oh, she didn't make it hot. I just know that if she did make it hot, I would have several friends who would know exactly how to treat her, for example. Drop my phone.
She can get it for you. So. Oh, okay. So anyway, so what I was going to say about Yarvin is that I can tell the way that he talks. He strikes me as someone who either grew up as the only child around a bunch of adults, or a younger sibling with a bunch of older siblings who talked a lot, and he never got a word in edgewise. So once he actually got the opportunity to say something, he just had to brain drain. He had to get as much out as fast as he possibly could, and in the little intervals where his brain is trying to catch up to his mouth, he doesn't want to stop and take a breath because someone else might jump in and he won't be able to keep talking because he's so used to being interrupted. So he's kind of like, once I've got a hold of the radio station here, I just need to dominate it. I can't have any dead air. So he gets that. It's kind of the brain crutch where he says
Right.
Yeah, so it was just kind of an interesting little psychoanalysis thing. So for me, once I understood that, once I recognized that, it made it a lot easier to listen to him, because then I could track with his. It's like I could kind of mind meld with him a little bit, and I could track with what he was saying, and recognize, okay, he's gathering his thoughts through this process, and he just kind of has this built-in crutch. Anyways, okay, so
Carlyle,
yes. So. Mises to Carlyle. I think that, okay, so the main thing that you had highlighted there was that the progression. So when, let's see, where was it? War, peace. Okay, the needs for spontaneous order requires peace, security, law, and freedom, because order does not arrive spontaneously. That's one issue with like libertarian theory, is that order doesn't arrive spontaneously. Order is created. And I guess you could quibble with the definition of spontaneously here. I guess you could say that, like, humans is there when humans create order, that is order spontaneously arriving. But there's this assumption that humans are all like individually autonomous acting beings. This is kind of the fundamental leftism or the egalitarianism latent in libertarianism, that they have this assumption that human beings are kind of all on an equal playing field. They're all individual, equivalent actors that each act according to their own self-interest, and they're all able to choose what they want to do because kind of they drive it based on following their own interests, et cetera, et cetera. But human beings are not on a level playing field. All human action is not the same. All humans are not created equal. Different people have different capacities and different interests and different strengths. And what always ends up happening is you get the Pareto distribution, where a small group of people are directing the actions of everybody else. And the attempt to just decentralize everything and just say, okay, order is going to develop spontaneously. Well, it will. You will get order developing spontaneously, but it's not going to be free order. It's not going to be this the libertarian ideal of people just kind of naturally cooperating. And the only way that you get that's one of the things I'm going to talk about from this tweet thread I did yesterday. But the only way that you get that is if the people have a single uniting philosophy that they all organize around, has embedded itself in their psyche, and that they feel like their survival depends upon them acting in coordination with it. And that's why religions always develop, because that's what unites people. People unite around a metaphysical ideal that they are fully convinced governs them. And then the governance structures that they implement in the earth are just a manifestation of that metaphysical thread that they see, that they're trying to latch themselves onto, and they're trying to let the metaphysical guide the physical. That's where you build up government institutions in the form of whatever god you revere, whatever god is at the pinnacle of your moral hierarchy. So if you just allow order to develop, quote unquote, spontaneously the way libertarians want it to, you're going to naturally get the people who are most inclined to use force against other people, though, because by definition, you're effectively saying, with respect to the government, everyone should adopt a position of pacifism. And a whole group of pacifists are going to be easily dominated and controlled by a single person who decides, well, I'm not going to be a pacifist. So if you just allow a society to organize itself just naturally, you're never going to wind up with a libertarian ideal. You're never going to wind up with peace and security and law. I mean, you're going to wind up with law, but it's not going to be law that promotes freedom or peace or security. If you want law that promotes peace, security, and freedom, then the people who value that must be the ones taking control of the society. And that's where he arrives at the political conclusions that he does. So in each specific case, always work for the next step. So To advance order, always work for the next step without skipping steps. In a state of war, advance toward peace. So if you're at war, do whatever is necessary to no longer be at war, because war is the opposite of freedom. In a case of war, nobody's going to be free. So you have to first work toward peace. Get peace at whatever cost, no matter what. Next, in a state of insecurity, advance towards security. In a state of security, advance toward law. In a state of law, advance toward freedom. So only once you have taken control of the law can you advance toward freedom. And right now, we're effectively in a state of war and a state of insecurity. We're not anywhere remotely close to the realization of freedom the way the libertarians see it. So we have our work cut out for us. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's between here and there. And in order to know what to do in that interim, in order to try to be the ones who bring about the ideal society that we would prefer to live in, we have to understand how we got to this point and understand the workings of this machine called reality that we exist in. We need to lift the hood up, and we need to look underneath the hood and see how the engine works. And once we've understood how reality works, then we know how to hack it, how to program it to try to bring about the reality that we want. So this was the tweet thread that I did last night. Did you have anything else you want to add before I go into this, Stephen?
No, I know. I think if anyone isn't familiar with that, hasn't read it, listened to it. I also put in the comments the audio version of it. I think someone just ran it through a pretty decent text to speech app or whatever. But you can just kind of listen to it if you prefer to listen to it as opposed to read his blog posts or whatever, because he's wordy. But
where did you say you posted it?
Oh, I posted it right here in the live chat. Matthew, I might call you Matthew. Yeah, it's up in the comments, but it's a 3-part series on the YouTubes, and it's up there somewhere from Mises to Carlyle. I put the link. I didn't put the link. Did I not put the link?
I don't see it anywhere. I just wanted to make sure that we got it in
now
there
I posted it. Now I posted it at the bottom.
Okay.
Or at least I hope I didn't. Fuck, I hope that's what it is. So yes,
I wonder if it's blocking you from posting
I wonder
the link.
if it posts. Okay, anyway.
Message it to me on Facebook and I'll post it in there.
All right, sounds like a plan. For me, when I was sort of encountering libertarianism, I always saw that it had a shortcoming. What I really noticed was that it seems like everyone has this post-libertarian moment where they kind of realize that they you take an extreme example like Christopher Cantwell or something like that. But I think people just get so frustrated with the lack of power that they have that they just move in this wild authoritarian direction, or like Molyneux or any of these people who it seemed like, I'm not saying they all take in the best direction, but they move past libertarianism and realize in one way or another, man, we got no power. We are in a war, and they may overreact and take it where they take it, but they realize that if it's them or us, it's got to be us. You know what I mean? That's running things and get it to a point where we can get to the next step. And so this is just sort of a more well thought out path, as opposed to just deciding that you're going to become a neo-Nazi or whatever you may do. But yeah, even some people are just like, nah, fuck this, I'm just going to be a Republican. Just whatever anyone's post-libertarian moment is. I think reading this will sort of satisfy that.
Very much. It'll give you a much clearer perspective on what the wisest actions are. Becoming a neo-Nazi, even leaving aside any possible moral implications about their worldview, it's just a plain fact that it's extremely non-adaptive. Becoming a neo-Nazi is Moldbach actually has a really interesting piece he wrote. I think he called it "Why I'm Not a White Nationalist" or "Why I'm Not an Anti-Semite" or something like that. And he leaving aside any other conversation about it, the fact is that adopting that worldview publicly and acting upon it is the surest way to get yourself under the microscope of the beast and get yourself crushed. It's like the worst possible strategy at all. Like from a strategic perspective, and if the moral argument against it isn't sufficient for you, then the pragmatic argument against it should be. It doesn't matter what's true; it matters what people believe is true.
Well, let's just see if we can play devil's advocate here, Matthew. If I may call you Matthew, I'm going to go to Christopher Cantwell's Twitter and see what he has to say.
Oh.
Well,
guys, go to his YouTube.
His YouTube channel. Oh.
Oh, wait, he's in prison. Oops.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm sure that maybe he's going to be the new Antonio Gramsci who changes the world with his writings from his prison cell.
That would be hilarious.
My guess is that he probably could have a much better impact on the world if he was not in prison. And people say whatever they want about his it's unjust that he was put there and they framed him and whatever. Well, of course they did. Of course they did. Because he outed himself as a white supremacist. What?
Is it in there he sits?
Right. Okay. So I got the thing in there. People said it did show up in the comments, so I don't know why I didn't see it, but it is there now. So if you're watching this after the fact, you can just I'll throw the link to the From Mises to Carlyle audio version in the show notes on the YouTube channel. So just go there if you want to see it. All right, so on to the actual main content. We're 51 minutes into our stream, and we're just now going to get on to the main content of today's episode. And if you don't like that, then fucking unsubscribe from the channel, because Matthew doesn't want part of your bullshit. If you do like it, then please like the episode, subscribe to the channel, share it. Go retweet it. I posted on Twitter. Go retweet it. Try and get this word out for other people who are like-minded. I want to create an echo chamber. Our goal is to create an echo chamber of everybody so we can just sit around and talk about these ideas until the cows come home.
Yes, and yeah, so basically the person that you will reach out and talk to feel sane, if it isn't either me or Matthew, depending on who's in this chat right now, message them and show them the show.
Yes. Good call. Okay. Finally.
Here we are.
On to the main content here. So again, I started today's show. I called it The Fourth Turning, History's Rhymes and What's Different Now. So the fourth turning is, let me pull up the description of it here. It's a term from something called Strauss-Howe generational theory, which is a very interesting theory about the progression of historical events. And we're not going to go deep into Strauss-Howe generational theory today. We're just going to kind of touch on it. But part of basically what they did is they categorized a large extent of human history, and they observed that there's a consistent cycle of different turnings throughout a generation. And each aspect of the cycle lasts something like 80 to 90 years, approximately that. And there's a specific psychological characteristic of each cycle. And an average life is 80 years and consists of 4 periods of 20 to 22 years. So childhood, young adult, midlife, and elderhood. Then you get, so generations are an aggregate of people born every 20 to 22 years. And each generation experiences 4 turnings every 80 to 90 years, from the high to the awakening to the unraveling to the crisis. And then it circles back through. And each generation has a like a personality, kind of. So the personality starts with the hero, then goes to the artist, then the prophet, then the nomad, and then back to the hero. So right now, our current generation, the baby boomers would be the prophet, the Gen X would be the nomad, and the prophet is idealist, the nomad is reactive. The millennials would be the hero, which is civic, and then the Zoomers, or the homeland generation they call it, would be the artist or adaptive. And
they call them the homeland generation?
Yeah. I actually don't know why that is.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But so anyway, so there's you can go read this for yourself. Just look up Strauss-Howe generational theory and you can get the details on that. What I wanted to focus on today is the fact that each turning is approximately 80 years, and it accords with the human lifespan. And there's a lot of other aspects where I went into this before. I got this super complicated explanation I tried to give here on one of the past episodes, talking about the the great year and cosmic cycles and how it's broken down into 360 sections of 72 years, yada yada yada. It's read Graham Hancock if you want more on that. But what stood out to me is that again there was this observation of human cycles lasting about 72 years, which is about the length of a human lifespan. And what I'm wondering is my theory is that we're seeing an acceleration of time due to the internet. And with the introduction of the internet, I wonder if the theory is going to start breaking down, or if it will retain this 70 or 80 year cycle. And I'll go into that a little more here in just a minute, but I want to read through this thread that I posted last night, because I kind of had a brainwave on this, and I think it provides good context for thinking about historical cycles and why history cycles the way that it does. So here's what I tweeted. I said, history, quote unquote, is a deeply layered network of narratives humans have communicated and are communicating as stories to one another. It's not a ledger of accounting dutifully copied down by rote as an objective reporting of actual events. It is necessarily subjective. I think that we tend to have this kind of implicit view of history, as if like we read the history books and what we're reading is akin to an accountant's ledger, where it's just kind of an objective reporting of the events that happened and why they happened and what happened after that. And it's kind of like the people who are recording history are just kind of mindlessly passing on whatever events happened in their lifetime. But as one of my favorite tweets of all time, Amused Chimp tweeted, "If the news is fake, imagine history." And I think it was it Alexander the Great who said that history is a set of lies agreed upon. This is kind of the dynamic that I'm trying to highlight here, is that the history is just a network of stories that we tell each other. It starts off, it makes sense if you imagine, hunter-gatherers around a campfire, and the way that they have, like, they don't have paper or anything, they just have stories that they're able to communicate information. So they might develop, like, going all Jordan Peterson, they might develop archetypal stories. So they get like the story of the stories, and they develop archetypal characters, and that eventually becomes you get hero narratives, and then from that you derive a god, and from that you derive a religion. It all begins with stories that people tell each other. But by definition, those stories are going to be subjective, because nobody has an objective view of the world. When you get enough people who all see the world the same way, it might give more of an appearance of objectivity, but again, it's just a collection of subjective perspectives. You can't take a collection of subjective perspectives and derive from it an objective perspective. If anything, the more that you collect it, the more subjective it becomes. There's a long history of human beings in groups acting a lot dumber than human beings as a standalone. So the more narratives that or the more perspectives that you're bringing in, the more subjective and the more intertwined the story, the narrative becomes. But we deceive ourselves into thinking that it's objective. So when we look back at history, there's just kind of like a general narrative that's been delivered to us. We read the history books, and then we learn, okay, this is what happened, and we just kind of assume it as fact. We just take it as a fact, in the same way that you might report that, the way the moon exists where it does and moves the way it does, or the sky is blue, or whatever else. We just take it as like a scientific fact. But history isn't science. History is narrative. And if you read a good historian, you'll realize that he's just telling stories. He's not like dispassionately relaying events, a ledger of events. He's telling a story. He's weaving together a narrative. He highlights this thing and not this thing. He by what he chooses to talk about, he colors the narrative. Because if he's choosing to talk about this thing, he's not choosing to talk about this thing. If he's taking this perspective on a specific event, he's not taking this other perspective. And that's part of one of the ideas I had for starting this podcast, and one of the probably a series of videos we'll do in the future is looking at, like, they say the winners write the history books. We'll look at what the losers would have said. What was the story of the losers in every major conflict? How did they see the world? It was a clash of views of the world, and one ultimately won out. And so we those people earned the right to tell their story, but the people who they destroyed didn't get the same right to tell their story. And so if we're only listening to the winners, we're only getting half the picture. We're not getting the whole picture of what human history contains for us. And I want as much information as I can. I want to know the whole story to the best of my ability. So
that's what was what put it in perspective for me was just imagining this past year. Just the past year, not even the past 5 years or 10 years but just the past year, if it was in a history book somewhere where it needed to be in a classroom immediately. So even without 20 years going by or whatever else, but if you just needed to have it in a classroom, 2020, how vastly different it would be from anything that we or most people watching this would relate it if we had to explain it to somebody who just fell out of the sky or woke up from a coma. And then that's 1 year. That's 1 year with cell phones and all kinds of technology and podcasts and all kinds of social media and video and even right now, just look at COVID, for example, or look at Boater Squad or a lot of these other things. And
just Capitol Hill, just the Capitol Hill event. Imagine.
Alone. Yes. And so if you can get that, what is your hope of thinking that you have an accurate idea of 1776 or 1492 or anything in history? What is your confidence level? Because it's the same human beings that are party to living the history and then recording it, telling it, squashing it. It's just a total mind fuck. It makes you wonder if it's worth it at all to even attempt to know anything.
A good example of this is when Hotep Jesus was on Joe Rogan, and he talked about the slave trade. If you haven't heard that, go listen to it. I think it was toward the end of the conversation, but Hotep Jesus has a pretty unique perspective on the slave trade, and he kind of blew Joe's mind, and Joe wasn't buying it. But that's a very good example of what we're talking about here, where we have the story that we've been told about what happened in America from 1500 to 1900, and it's been very beaten into our heads, and the vast majority of people take it as fact. They take history as fact, but history isn't fact. History is fiction. It's a fiction that's been crafted to try to describe the facts. It's stories that people have put together to try to describe what actually happened. But it's necessarily subjective, and it's derived at the pleasure of the people who have the power to tell the story and to the people who have the power to control the flow of information. So okay, that was all of that about the first tweet that I tweeted. So through a process of natural selection, those stories congeal into a few broad select narratives. Those narratives describe the nature of the world as humans have discovered it. Humans are natural conclusion drawing machines, so we derive prescriptions from them. Those prescriptions become religions. So those, as people are viewing the world, encountering the world, and societies are becoming more complex, and more people are, you start with a tribe of 10 people, and they have their story that they tell about how they progressed across the desert and got into this area and built up a little civilization in this oasis, and more people are born. And as children, as parents have children, they tell them the stories of their great trek across the desert to get there, and the great men who led them, and what their characteristics were, and why they did what they did, and maybe some guy had murdered the prior king and he took over, and so then he has a story that he told about why he did it. And say he had never been successful in murdering the king and taking over the tribe, and he'd attempted but he'd failed, then the story that the tribe has told generations hence is going to be completely different. But his motivations didn't necessarily change. It's just the person who got to tell the story changed. And so then history changes based on who took power and who did what and when it happened. And all of this is all just a subjective retelling by the people of the tribe. And eventually the tribe gets bigger and bigger, and then it maybe eventually runs into another tribe, and those tribes clash, and they each have a different view of the world, and so those views of the world clash, and eventually one wins out, and the society becomes even bigger. And this has been the course of human history ever since then. So when people describe the world, people encounter the world around them and they describe it, they tell a story about it. And when they say this is the nature of the world, they decide, okay, well, if this is the nature of the world, then this is how I should act in the world. And as I encounter other people, I'm going to try to get them to act the same way. I want everyone to all act in the same way, because we need to come together, and there's strength in numbers, and we have to all act as a unit together to survive. We have to look out for each other. We have to, harvest the crops and, whatever else. So the only way that we can have a healthy, secure, stable society is if we all see the world the same way, and we all act as if as if we live in the same world. So that's where religions ultimately come from. Because the definition of the nature of the world as humans understand it is rather up for debate. People segregate into different groups, aligning themselves with those who share their understanding of the world, their religion. This is why people arrange themselves around religions, because a religion is ultimately just a description of how people understand the world around them. So some religions are heavy on the descriptive. They just describe the world. Some are heavy on the prescriptive. They say, based on the world being this way, this is how you should then live. Over time, the latter, the prescriptive religions, begin to generate conflict with the former. Because if you have a belief about the world that obligates you to act in a certain way, you're more likely, you are going to be more spurred to action. You're going to be more spurred to action, to act and to try to craft the world around you. So a prescriptive religion is going to be more influential, ultimately, than a descriptive religion. One way of understanding the nature of the world, or one religion, eventually wins out over others. If the losers are able to flee, they survive. So imagine two tribes clashing with each other. The one that has either more people or the more powerful understanding of the world, the ones who see the world most accurately and are able to act according with the world in the best way, are the ones that are going to win out. And they're going to overpower the losing tribe. And so then what happens with the losing tribe? Well, if they're able to flee, then they can survive. They'll get away and they'll go kind of try to remake their tribe elsewhere. If they're not able to flee, then they're destroyed, either through oppression, slavery, and secondhand citizenship, or through open genocide. The reason I said secondhand citizenship is because perhaps they may survive and they'll be taken prisoner, and they're like integrated into society. But part of integrating with the society is necessarily doing away with or moving away from their prior view of the world. They have to update their view of the world. They have to update their operating system, and they have to see the world in a new way so that they can assimilate with the people with the new culture that's taken them over. So if they don't assimilate, if they don't subject their understanding of the world to someone else's understanding of the world, then they'll be destroyed through, typically the way it's always worked is through open genocide. They just kill them. They just annihilate all of them. That was the rule of human history for the vast extent of human existence. Is the winning religion annihilated the losing religion, just killed them all. Over a sufficient timeline, the number of ways of understanding the nature of the world, or the number of religions, tends toward one. As the more prescriptive religions are more likely to take over state institutions, they have a head start. If your view of the world compels you to act in a certain way, then whatever government exists, you're going to be more inclined to take it over, because you need to take over whatever institution you can find to try to create, to try to mold and craft the world in accordance with your view of it. So on a long enough timeline, the trajectory is that as long as we have the inability to flee this planet, either literally or figuratively, humanity will tend toward a single prescriptive religion. Overly prescriptive religions stimulate two broad responses. One, the demand for more descriptive religions that pose less of a threat to everyone. Think of libertarianism. People see statism and they're like, "Oh, it would be better if we had more libertarian government." We're describing the world in such a way. We're saying that the world is this way and it would be better if it was this other way, but it doesn't prescribe a specific set of actions. It just says the world would be better if it was this way. The second effect of overly prescriptive religions is demand for more prescriptive religions that pose more of a threat to the oppressive prescriptive religions. So when someone is taken over by a religion that stimulates its adherents to act in a certain way and to take over their society, then it will either, if it becomes oppressive and it starts pissing people off or making people uncomfortable, then they're most likely to say, we need an even more powerful religion that will beat it back. We need to have a better understanding, a better view of the world that will take over that one and beat it back and make us more comfortable. So given the trajectory, the religions that are more descriptive are simply prolonging the inevitable because they don't have a clear prescribed path forward. They're ultimately, on a long enough timeline through this process of natural selection, they're going to be subjugated or eliminated. Eventually, the prescriptive ones will win out. Their desire for less prescriptive religion only suits their own ends by definition, so it's likely to fail. Just because, so if I'm an adherent of an overly prescriptive religion that's really compelling me to act in a certain way, and someone else says, well, it would be better if your religion didn't try to get you to act that way. It would be better if you did this thing instead. Well, that doesn't suit my ends. That's just what that guy wants. So the fact that me being overly oppressive makes him uncomfortable and makes him want me to stop, that alone isn't going to make me stop. So if your religion, and again, I'm using a very specific definition of religion, which is your understanding of the nature of the world. If your understanding of the nature of the world does not incline you to take actions to ensure your survival, then you're likely to not survive. And I'm perfectly, like, a lot of people will say, oh, well, we aren't meant for this world. You know, we're meant for another world. Okay, that's fine. I'm talking about this world. So maybe it's fine if if all of your people, if you're a martyr and you die for your religion and, your ideas don't sustain themselves or don't perpetuate themselves, that's fine. That's to each his own. That's just the nature of your view of your understanding of the nature of the world. And that's fine. But I'm talking about, I'm trying to describe the way that a view of the world will sustain itself in this world, in this material reality that we exist in now. So it's simply a matter of time before we wind up with two broad religions. A, an archetypal aggressor prescriptive religion that has purged nearly all dissenters. Because as each religion, as it builds up and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and it gets more and more adherents that start purging the society of people who don't see the world the same way, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, and it constantly tends toward this. It wipes out another view of the world, and it assimilates the people from that religion that are willing to assimilate, and it gets larger, and it gets stronger, and it continues building this way. So it becomes an archetype. It becomes like the ultimate aggressor of all aggressors. The other broad religion that we'll wind up with is an archetypal defender prescriptive religion accumulated of all of the type 2 responders mentioned above. Okay, this is getting a little complicated, I realize. So the people who, in response to an oppressive religion, say we need a religion that will defend us, that will protect us from that one. Those types of people, as they get peeled off of their prior religion and they assimilate, they create a new one to combat that one, you wind up with these two. You wind up with like a David and a Goliath kind of. So the two will do battle, literally or figuratively, in a zero-sum struggle for ultimate supremacy. As time progresses forward, the conflict will exponentially increase in intensity until one obtains total victory and the other is completely purged. So you get a Pong effect that is like the walls are narrowing as the conflict is escalating back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. As you get, if you have 100,000 people in a given area and 80,000 of them subscribe to one view of the world and 20,000 of them subscribe to another, and that 80,000 starts wiping out the others Soon you get to 85 and 15. Then you get to 90 and 10. And there's an escalation throughout this process. So the intensity builds and builds and builds until one obtains total victory. Now, the one that obtains total victory isn't necessarily the more powerful one, because inevitably the more powerful one will have a misstep, will mess up, or they'll somehow something will be revealed about their view of the world that's no longer adaptive. And they aren't able to sustain their religion beyond that point. And their adherents will abandon it, and they'll move to another one. So it's not necessarily the case that the most powerful religion will ultimately purge all the others. Because I mean, if it was, I would imagine that we'd already be at the point where there is only one religion left. Somehow something happens where that dominant religion somehow gets subverted, gets overturned, and a new one takes its place. But the nature of the human experience is that new religions will always keep popping up. A dominant religion is ever at risk of being undermined and overthrown if it lets its guard down. This is an engineering problem. This is just a problem that needs to be, you need to come up with a solution for it. So you need to develop some sort of technology or process for preventing that from happening. So technology facilitates this process by amplifying and accelerating the cycle of the rise and fall of ways of understanding the world in two primary ways. One, removing friction from information transfer, allowing ideas to spread and people to be mobilized faster. And two, by improving a dominant religion's ability to identify, track, and purge dissenters, while improving a subject religion's ability to outwit or overpower a dominant religion. Therefore, technological development within human societies is focused on two primary fields. One, data transfer technology, and two, weapons technology. So the most powerful data transfer technology is money, because money is data. Money is information that's been consolidated into a means of exchange to move something around. It's value, and value is data. Value is information. It's inevitable that religion and government will become synonymous, and that the religion which populates the government will eventually take control of the money and the weapons. This is an evolutionary inevitability within humans. You will never separate government from weapons or government from money. They will always wind up with it, and they will always be governed by a religion. A religion will take control of the government and will take control of all money and all weapons. It's just a matter of which one. The most adaptive religion is the one that prescribes that you adapt your view of the nature of the world to fit whatever is currently the dominant view of the nature of the world. Let me say that again. The most adaptive religion, the one that's most likely to persist, will be the one that tells its adherents to adapt your understanding of the world to fit whatever is the dominant understanding of the world. So this is an unprincipled religion. It's the religion whose principles are side with power no matter what. The way you should act is the way that facilitates the existing power. A religion that built up around that concept or that principle would necessarily survive anything, because they would always just act in accordance with power. So as far as I can make out, it is inevitably, entirely, just a matter of time until either one of two things. Such a Machiavellian religion establishes effective, permanent, dominant control over the entire world, or B, a metaphysical intervention completely changes the ballgame and breaks the cycle. So that was the end of the thread. So what I am up against, I couldn't take it beyond that point because I don't really know. I understand how things work up to that point, but I don't understand how they work beyond that. I just know that it seems to me, from an anthropological perspective, that it's inevitable that the entire world will be governed by a single religion or a single view of the world, a single way of understanding the nature of the world that is obsessed with power and will do whatever it needs to align itself with power and to promote the interests of power. The only way to combat a religion like that I can understand is to overpower it. Either that or you have to go outside this reality. There has to be something that's outside this reality that causes some kind of a metaphysical intervention that changes that changes the nature of reality. You know, we discover other dimensions, or we're able to move between different timelines, to literally travel in time, or you know, whatever. Some sort of something like that is the only thing that I can think of. Otherwise, I think that it's inevitable, no matter what, that we're going to wind up in a situation where we will not only be dominated by a one world government, we will be dominated by a one world religion that is obsessed with power. And I don't think that there's anything that we can do to change that. The only thing we can do is attempt to be on the side of whatever that religion is. The only thing we can do is we can seek to understand power and take it. And that will be the only way to survive going forward. You have any thoughts so far, Stephen?
No, I put in some suggested listening when you're talking about a religion whose goal is only power.
I know exactly what you're thinking of.
Yeah, Mr. Anamnesis.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm doing a bit where I'm going to say his name as wrong as possible.
We need to keep doing that until he chimes in and he says something about it.
Anamnesis.
Anamnesis, yeah. That his description of progressivism, of American popular culture, is that last video, The Mystery Cult of Power, is just absolutely phenomenal. And when I think of this, how did I describe it? I called it the most adaptive religion is the one that prescribes that you adapt your view of the nature of the world to fit whatever is currently the dominant view of the nature of the world. I think of how can I say this without getting our channel deleted, or getting myself on a watch list? I'm sure I probably already am. It's the people who all of the conspiracy theories revolve around. It's the people who are the people who Alex Jones is obsessed with.
Yeah.
Central bankers is a shorthand for it, but it's beyond. It goes even above and beyond the central bankers. The people, the dark figures who inhabit the smoky rooms and are the real string pullers in the world. That's effectively what their religion is. I don't know if you call it Luciferianism or what, but effectively their religion is pursue power at all costs. Align yourself with power, whatever it is. And so it doesn't matter who wins what war, they're on the winning side. And honestly, the brilliance of it is kind of impressive. I mean, what they're doing is that people want to act according to their own principles, and they're capitalizing on that by their principles being use whatever principles are necessary to win at all costs. And so they keep winning. Now, my suspicion, I think especially a lot of Christians are probably tripping out hearing this, because they're like, well, this world isn't the only one that matters, and they're going to pay a price. I think they probably will. I agree with that. But I want to understand how to make myself immune from them. And I want to understand how to protect other people from them. They have a pretty... they've got a death grip on the world right now, and they're kind of making the world their plaything. But I don't think that that's inevitable. I don't think that their victory is inevitable. I think that there's a lot that we can do once we understand how they work. I think that we have the capacity to put ourselves in position to capitalize and to benefit going forward. But that kind of gets me to the last thing that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, the lizard people. Exactly. What I wanted to get to here is I guess we've used Dave Smith as a punching bag for the last several episodes, and so we don't need to.
You did. I certainly didn't. I love Dave, and I think he's great. I do have one small quibble with him where he kind of platforms white nationalists and is a to the alt-right and Libertarian Party. I'd love to debate him on lines of liberty after he debates Ben Armani, but yeah, I didn't use him as a punching bag. That was all you.
That was me. That was all me. Yeah. and it's all I have no idea how he would feel about it, but what's that?
We kid.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
you know, I punch because I love. I want to see him be successful,
So successful.
and I'm afraid that our little boy, he's growing up so fast. I want him to be successful, and I'm afraid that the steps that he's taking right now are not the optimal ones that he could take. And so I wanna troubleshoot his tactics. I want to troubleshoot his view of the world. But today is we're not going to talk about Dave. Today, and I'm not going to do the punching bag thing. That's just kind of a bit. But Vin Armani has been really making the rounds lately, and I've been really tormented by what he's talking about, because I think that he is more right about what has been happening than anyone in the world. I think that he has his finger on the pulse of reality unlike anybody else. I think his description of the dim age and magic and the extent to which we're governed by religion is unmatched. I think that he has absolutely nailed it.
He's everything that that a lot of people are frustrated with like libertarian types ignoring.
Right.
He's like you know, he's he's kind of the myopic like autism and arrogance and whatever that seems to plague certain, you know, just like libertarianism in general and certain people or whatever, like that spot anyway. It's like if you took a little Vin Armani dropper essence and just sprinkled it on that little situation, that's what seems to be missing. That's what people kind of aren't talking about.
Right. And he gets it, and he describes it so well. He is like one of the most self-aware people I've ever heard. And I think he's been a huge impact on me. His description of, like, it's kind of like I had a breakthrough when I heard his description of magic and how a lot of what people see as a conspiracy. I mean, there's definitely conspiracy there, but there is a force that is motivating these people to act in coordination with one another without necessarily coordinating.
Right. Yeah. Like there was all right. There was no punching today, but I'm going to punch. So I was on my newly libertarian kind of Facebook or whatever. And it was a libertarian pointing out, and I think he's younger, you know, so I'll give him a break, whatever. But a libertarian like pointing out that the murder numbers have gone up, you know, and like, you know, he was kind of making the observation. It's like, oh yeah, it's almost as if, you know, if you lock people up and take away their jobs, you know, basically what's happening, you know, that all these stresses from, you know, lockdowns and this virus is contributing, you know, not only of course like mass starvation and anything else, you know, that people are dying of, but, you know, people are frustrated and killing each other. All right, fair observation, right? And so I commented and I said, it's all going according to plan, right? Which is just to point out gently that just like, this is not an unintended consequence. So much as this is fine. This is not even on the radar of anyone who has any real, you know, power behind anything that's going on. And if it's like lower level people, they're just so brainwashed, you know, that other things are more important, that for them it's unintended consequences. But as you work your way up, it's just like they're not even thinking. But like, of course, more people are gonna, yeah, fine. What's for lunch, right? And so that was the nature of my comment, as I think that you and like a lot of people listening would be able to understand. And so someone you know, really thought that they got me, and they said, yeah, all the leaders all across the world came together to conspire to create a virus so that more people would kill each other. And it's like, oh yeah, man, you really got me. You know, it's that arrogance. It's that arrogance that exists there. You know, of just being so convinced that you know exactly what's going on, and anyone else is an idiot. You know, I'm just always curious. I'm always curious.
Right.
Yeah, I think I have a beat on this or that, but I'm always trying to expand, you know, what my thought process is, you know, through more information. But the whole the whole the whole deal with, you know, conspiracy and people, oh yeah, so everyone got together. No, it's not necessarily everyone getting together. It's a set of perverse incentives that exist in all these different places, you know, in finance and up and down the hierarchies, right? And it's just people acting according to those incentives. Um, but there's like a bigger force at work. So no, it is not. It is not 2 or 10 or 10,000 or a million people, you know, communicated and carefully, very consciously coordinating their goals. That's not how it works at all. And no one is saying that. Anyone who is saying that, okay, yeah, they have like a piece of the puzzle missing. But just to write off conspiracy as being, you know, highly unlike, like, you know, the term conspiracy is just made to, you know, sort of, you know, shut you up anyway, and you know, discount you in a conversation. But no, of course that's not how it works. But okay, so some of these conspiracy theories, quote unquote, seem to make sense, but it seems unlikely that it would work in such a way that, you know, all these people are getting together and carefully coordinating the future. Oh, well, let's just forget about it. No. Well, how does it work? And so that is a lot of the value of, you know, kind of what Vin's talking about.
Right. It's the bell curve meme where like the low IQ people are like, you know, all the powerful people are working together to in a great conspiracy to kill everyone. And then the people in the middle, the midwits, are all, you know, oh, you can't believe in conspiracies. Oh, that's just silly. You know, that dismissive sarcasm is like Scott Adams talks about it as a tell. When you say, when you start a sentence with so, like that, and then you state something with, and you use your disbelief to try to disprove it. That's a tell. It's a tell for midwittery. And so then the people at the top of the bell curve, the high IQ people, are like, all the world's leaders are working together in a conspiracy to kill everyone. I mean, but it doesn't have to be. The difference there is recognizing that the way that humans organizations work doesn't require coordination. It's spontaneous. They're spontaneously acting according to existing incentives. And it just so happens that when they spontaneously act, given the nature of the system and the nature of the incentives, it seems like they're coordinated. And I guess part of it's interesting, part of the high IQ stuff is pattern matching, is being able to like see patterns more easily. So I guess that's probably the dynamic there. That's why the higher IQ people will see the pattern. They recognize it. They recognize that. I think that the midwit people, the reason there's such a resistance to the idea of a conspiracy is because it freaks people out, and they don't want to have their reverie shattered and realize that they don't control what they think they control. There's this illusion of everybody being kind of like that humans naturally exist on a level playing field, and that there will always be a return to that state. It's like they have this idea that humans are trying to naturally achieve a state of egalitarianism or equality, and that humans just naturally are that way, and if you just leave them alone, it'll naturally go to that. And that's not at all how it is. Humans are very hierarchical. Humans are extremely hierarchical, and they naturally tend toward hierarchies. And when you get to the highest levels, the incentives that exist there for people to sustain their power just so happen to make them pretty sociopathic. So then they don't have to coordinate explicitly. Now there is explicit coordination as well, but they don't have to coordinate explicitly. But what's interesting is, what is that dynamic? What's that phenomenon? Why is it that they're all incentivized to act that way? What's going on behind the scenes? It's like they're being guided. The way that Venn described it is like it's like the force of instinct that drives bees or ants to act in a certain way. They all act. They don't have to communicate. They all act on instinct, and they move as a coordinated bunch, or like a flock of birds. You watch a flock of birds fly, and it moves like one single entity, even though there's a bunch of them all acting within it, and they are all driven by incentives. Those incentives exist on like a plane that we can't see them, we can just see their effects. So what is that thing behind them? And if you can control that plane that affects people, you can control the people. And that's effectively magic. We have no idea how it works. It might as well be magic. And his observation there has been just absolutely crucial and phenomenal. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just wondering when
Okay.
you're going to start shitting on him. Inevitably.
So I had this conversation with Stephen a while, and I'm going to be a lot nicer to Vin than I am to Dave.
He'll cast a fucking spell
I don't-
on you.
What's that?
He'll cast a fucking spell on you.
Yeah, he's a fucking warlock.
Yeah.
I don't think that Vin's wrong. I just want to ask him lots of questions because something that he's doing isn't sitting right with me. It's not making sense to me, and I want him to prove me wrong. And he's agreed to come on the show, and so this is a preview. We'll end up talking to him about this eventually, and it should be a really good conversation. But one reason I had a hard time, I actually had to stop listening to him for a little while because I told Steven this. I said that it's like he's doing nothing but just dispensing black pills, and I don't hear a call to action apart from his talk he had with Lions Liberty, where he said his call to action was get your shit and go, and that just isn't a very good call to action. I don't care how right it is. It's not compelling. It does it, so it defeats its purpose. It's not people don't respond to that. And I understand he's trying to communicate the desperation of the situation, and that this is the trains to Auschwitz are starting up, and if you don't get out, then you're going to be on them. I understand that's his perspective, and he's trying to communicate that idea. But the fact is, looking around, I don't see any trains. I see people who are talking about trains, talking about creating them, but I don't see any yet. And I don't see a clear path to them being created. And we're so far from it. And the nature of, we have this recency bias that's part of our psychology. So as bad as things seem, also we live a really, really cushy life. Even people that are having a difficult time have enormous privilege and opportunity right at their fingertips. We're in this bizarre situation where we're like right on the cusp of absolute chaotic destruction, and also like utopian nirvana. Like it's life has the potential right now to be either the worst it's ever been or the greatest that it's ever been. And what is it that is preventing us from going in one of the two directions? What are the forces that are holding us back from each direction? Now, he had this conversation with Mark Claren, Lions Liberty, back in June, and he said then, he was like, this is the last time I'm going to talk about this stuff publicly. And after this, I'm just going to put my head down, because basically the subtext or whatever, basically what he was saying is that everything's going to go downhill from here. And a year from now, basically we're going to live in a completely different world that's just totally different and totally unlike anything that any of us wants to live in. And while things in some sense have gotten worse since June, they've also gotten better. Things don't seem like they've progressed quite the way that he expected them to, or that he was talking about them progressing. Now, things can change very fast. I'm well aware of that. And, I like to say, if you were in December of 2019 and you looked around and somebody told you in 6 months, every developed country in the world is going to be completely locked down and you're going to get arrested if you walk outside your house. Like, people would have thought that was insane. And 6 months later, that's where we were. So things can change very, very fast. And I grant that. I recognize that. But why is it that we seem further from boxcars now than we did last June? There's like the emperor's new clothes, the emperor's lack of clothing is becoming more and more apparent to more and more people. And we've seen things like South Dakota and Florida where specific regions have started to rise up as beacons of liberty, for lack of a better term. And
Liberty love.
fuck. God damn it. John says, oddly enough, Nirvana translated into English means blowout. I wonder if Kurt Cobain knew that. Oh my God.
Damn, Michael Malice.
Predictive programming.
Wow.
Oh man. Okay. So I guess my question that I want to talk with Ven about is I'll put it this way. I don't think that the worst case scenario he foresees is going to happen. And I fully recognize that this could be cope. This might be me overdosing on the copium. But it seems everyone always wants to think that the time they live in is different than all the other ones. But in this case, I think that there's a legitimate reason for thinking that. And that's because now we have something that past generations didn't, which is the internet. And when you think of the way that, they say that like history repeats itself, and those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And part of the reason that happens is because the human life cycle is 70 or 80 years. And someone was talking the other day about how basically we almost have nobody left who actually experienced World War II and the events surrounding that, the genocide surrounding that. And for that reason, the implication is for that reason, we're more likely to repeat those events, repeat the events that repeat the actions that lead to those events, because it's like we're further away from the people who actually experienced it. And that makes some sense to me. I can understand why that would be the case, and I think that there's definitely legitimacy to that perspective. But the nature of the internet is that we're able to preserve more information and spread it more widely than any human beings ever have in the past. And now people are like hyper aware of the potential for genocide. Genocide hardly ever leaves the conversation. People are always talking about genocide. And so you might say that there's so much about it that people have become numb to it. And when an actual genocide happens, people are less likely to respond to it. I don't, but then wouldn't the messaging be then to make sure people are aware of that and to act to avoid it, to take the steps necessary to avoid it, rather than just throw our hands up and accept that it's going to happen? I think that the nature of the internet, like I said at the beginning of the show, I think that these time cycles are going to start accelerating. I think that they already are. I think generation gaps are narrowing. In the past, it's always been, something like 20 to 40 years per generation, because generational development depends upon the transmission of information, the development of technology that's slower when the world is less interconnected. But as the world is becoming more interconnected, human beings are becoming more self-aware. And the human entity as an organism itself is becoming self-aware. And for that reason, the gap from someone born in 1970 to someone born in 1980 is much bigger than the gap between someone born in 1980 and 1990. And it's much bigger than 1990 to 2000. And then 2000 to 2010, 2010 to 2020. Each of these, someone born in 2010 grew up in an entirely different world than someone born in 2000. And in a much different way than the gap between someone born in 1940 and 1950. The technology, the hockey stick of technology, is causing the world to change really, really rapidly. And new people are growing up in a completely different world. But we're retaining, in a lot of ways, the memory of the past generations a lot more. We're able to preserve information a lot better. And there's all these pitfalls about, people being able to restrict it or manipulate it. And, we talked about fake news and history being one-sided and all that granted. But I want to understand how the internet potentially changes these generational cycles. And if we're going to reach a point, I think we're going to reach a point where something has to give, something has to break, because we're more or less stuck on this planet for the time being, and we're like on the cusp of some sort of radical change, radical transformation, radical difference. And I think I just don't see how this world could sustain the degree of genocide that Venn is predicting. I don't see technologically how it would happen, and how it would be tolerated, how it would proceed forward. I guess so. That's my. That's very wandering. I understand. I don't have an answer here, but my suspicion is that the nature of the internet has changed the game, and the availability of information and the ability to generate technology that individual people can control, that dramatically changes the world, is it empowers individuals now in a way that past individuals were not empowered. And that can obviously be used for great evil, but I think that it can also be used for great good. And the question is, how do we leverage that technology to bring about a better world, rather than just bunkering down, putting our heads down, and waiting for it to blow over and expecting everything to proceed exactly how it has in the past?
Computers, man, the internet.
Fucking magnets, how do they work?
No, it would be interesting to hear. I'm glad that you feel a little bit more hopeful, because my experience with Vin was listening to him on Pete's show and hearing him talk about it was like the first, I think it was like the first time that he may have referenced like the dim age on Pete's show, but it was all of my worst thoughts. It was just someone else saying everything that I had feared since March of 2020.
Right.
And I was like, I bet this son of a bitch is right. Damn it. You know, because it resonated. But
that was my issue with him, is I had to stop listening to him because he was just spewing out black pills like a motherfucker. There was just black pills everywhere. And I was like, how do you, how am I supposed to take this? Because he's like, get your shit and go. Okay, well, I can't. I simply can't. So, okay, so then what do? You have to, there has to be more to this message than just leave. Because I think that if what he's describing is true, being in Saipan is not going to do anything for him. It's going to come to Saipan. If what he's describing is true, we're talking about the end of the world. We're talking about like nuclear holocaust, or, going and trying to get away isn't going to save you. And I think deep down, I think the fact that he's continuing to be vocal and continuing to speak out about this, even if he doesn't realize it, I think it reveals that he doesn't fully believe that that's going to happen. Because if he did, he'd be shutting up and keeping his head down. The fact that he keeps talking about this implies that he thinks that there's a better option available. He thinks that there's a chance for a better world than the one that he seems to expect is inevitable. So what is that? Why he said that he was going to stop talking in June, but it's almost March and he's still doing interviews and still talking about all of this. Why is that?
I have a small amount of insight into this. I'm going to keep it to myself, I think, for now. And because the amount of insight I have pales in comparison to the amount of questions that I also have. So I would say I think that there's a lot of ways that you can prepare, and I think it is a period of preparation. I think Vin, for somebody who is predisposed to agreeing with him or seeing the threats already, that he can be a black pill in that way. But for people that hadn't considered those possibilities, I think that he was trying to just see, okay, who can hear me? Who might I be able to wake up?
Yeah.
People who I think me and you are probably, our immediate reaction probably was something akin to, oh shit, this could be bad, And then there's some other people are just like, oh man, masks, the government, am I right? You're like, we need to talk to you a little bit. And so I think maybe that's where Vin's role was just seeing, who can hear me, who can hear what I'm saying. And then I think so geographically, there's ways to prepare, but I think there's other ways to prepare also, and I think just like, how you equated Trump to sort of being like jamming a chair underneath the door. I think, moving the Saipan, is a way of doing. But I had such a similar idea of, when I read Harry Brown's book, How to Live Free in an Unfree World. And my immediate reaction was just like, man, this is going to get to a point, ironically enough, because of technology. Like this is going to get to a point where there's just there's no place it's going to affect you everywhere. And so, okay, you can go be an agorist or a fake agorist, or you can go here, you can go there, you can do this and do that. But it's just like on a long enough timeline, it's going to get everywhere. And it seems like that timeline is just rapidly accelerating, because of technology. And I know that some people's like linchpin is medical IDs, which is why they're totally freaked the fuck out about the COVID and the vaccine. I did say the COVID. I was going to say the COVID vaccine, but I'm aware I said the COVID. Well, makes money for saying the COVID. I was going to go into a thing that would certainly get us canceled on YouTube, but I'm not going to do it. But that's why people are freaked out about the COVIDs here, because of all the potential. So again, the snarky thing of just like, oh yeah, did they put GPS tracker in your vaccine? It's like, yeah, no, that's not what this is about. Not even a little bit. But just the idea of being able to control movement and using this technology. A lot of people, think that's sort of when it's the point of no return, and that's when it's over, and that's why people are freaked out. But yeah, I think there's a lot of great questions for Vin, a lot of them, and just kind of viewing this whole, viewing everything from the standpoint of just like there's a turning of the age from the material to the spiritual, and that's like the friction that we're experiencing. But yeah, I think that it's a war being fought on a spiritual level, and I think that's why sometimes it can feel, if you're in tune with the universe anyway, sometimes it can feel more hopeful and sometimes it can feel less hopeful because the war is being waged as we speak.
Yeah, that's the energy. Like you're feeling the energy. Human beings are we don't give enough credit to our ability to sense energy and to pick up on what's going on based on that. And I think that's a big frontier for research. Like Peter Thiel talks about, over the last 50 years, basically, there's been a ton of research done on bits, and we've advanced significantly in our capacity using bits. But there's been very little innovation with respect to atoms. We haven't done a lot of work with atoms, and atoms, ATOMS, and that's really fallen behind. And it's interesting that it kind of seems like the last major accomplishment in terms of atoms was going to the moon. And it's kind of like everything stopped after that. And now, like, they put a man on the moon in 1968, and
allegedly.
Allegedly. And my favorite is Alex Jones's take on that, where he says the moon landing was faked because humans had already gone to the moon, and
so good.
So it was like he picked the perfect way to piss off both sides. It was fantastic. God. But it's like somehow we were able to put a man on the moon in 1968 and then have never gone back, and it's like it's not possible anymore. And that just, obviously I don't buy that, but there's a lot of innovation that can be done. We've gotten out of balance. The atoms and the bits have gotten out of balance, and the atoms really need to catch up. And that makes me think that there's been a lot of innovation done in terms of atoms, but we just don't know about it. And we'll find out about it at some point. All of a sudden, we'll realize that there are capacities out there that never hit the mainstream that humans have, and we'll have to do with that what we will. But yeah, I guess I don't think that, like, taking this idea that what we're doing is we're repeating the Weimar Republic into Nazi Germany, but on a global scale. That whole theory is the description of the end of the world, as far as I can tell. And one thing that Jason Stapleton says that this really, it stuck with me when I heard him say this. He said, never bet on the end of the world because it only happens once. And if it does, it's not going to matter anyways. That really, really stuck with me when I heard that. And so I tend to have a very apocalyptic view of the world. I tend to always kind of expect that the end of the world is upon us. And so what I'm wondering here is what, if all of this is true, as this is what we'll talk with Venn about, if all of this is true as he sees it, then does he agree that it's the end of the world? If not, why not? If it is the end of the world, then why try to avoid it? Like why raise alarms about it? Like what are we gonna do if this is the end of the world? Then why not just kick back and let it happen and and move on? I guess that's yeah. I guess I don't really have anything else to say on the subject. I've kind of
Machiavellian. I mean, what's the utility of saying that it is the end of the world? Like maybe people will just comport themselves in such a way that if it was the end of the world, you would know how to act. No, okay, sorry. Okay, no, but yeah. So now I'm gonna start doing it. But yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, you would get your shit together. You know what I mean? You would behave as if you were going to become the person you needed to be if the end of the world was upon you and you didn't want it to happen. So maybe it's there can be several ends of the world metaphorically. Jason's right. There can only be one real one. You know what I mean? But the world that we as we know it can be ending, and it's just a matter of maybe it's prescriptive in the terms of encouraging people to prepare themselves in the best way that they can, because people have been on their heels for a while. So it's a lot of people with good ideas to get their shit together, myself included.
Yes, John, you did miss something. We are going to get Vin on. He's agreed to come on the show at some point. We just have to get that scheduled, and I wanted to get some other stuff done before we did that. John does make a good point. He said if we were really in tune with the universe, we'd be indifferent and happy about it. And that's true. Like, you get to decide what you get bent out of shape about. You get to decide, at any point you can plant your flag and say, okay, well, this is I'm just going to accept the world as it comes to me, and I'm going to be happy about it no matter what happens. So if I'm being skinned alive, I'm going to choose to be happy about it. And you have the capacity in your mind. If you train your mind, you have the capacity to be perfectly happy about the fact that you're being skinned alive. I'm reading the book Dominion by Tom Holland, and in it at the beginning, he's talking about a form of torture that the Persians used, which I can't remember. They called it like a skiffy or something like that. But it was, they took like a hollowed out tree trunk or a canoe or something like that and put a guy inside it and then put another one over top of it so that only his head and his arms were out. And then they fed him really, really well, and forced him to fill up the log that the boat he's inside with all of his excrement, and then just sit in it. And they doused him in honey as well. And then because he didn't have the ability to swat the flies and the bugs away from him, all of the feces would all build up and living things would accumulate within them, and they start eating him, and they would literally eat him alive. And he would eventually die when maggots and stuff basically ate his organs. And I was like, holy crap. But yeah, anyway, so that's a nice little thing to end the show on. But what I'm trying to say is that as horrifying as that is, I'm confident that if you trained your mind, you could exist through that and just decide to be happy through it all. So if it is the end of the world, just have a positive attitude about it.
Try it at home and let us know. So if you disagree with anything that Matt says, torture yourself in the way that he just described after you unsubscribe from the channel. But then pop in for the next live stream and let us know if you're able to give yourself a positive mental attitude and deal with the situation.
Positive mental attitude.
Best way possible.
Right. Yeah, I do, John. I do agree that we are entering the era of Revelations type shit. I am just unconvinced that it's inevitable that it's going to be the end of the world. I think that I'm very compelled by the idea of the whole Mayan end of the fourth age, happening around now, and that I think that people are going to survive through it, and I just want to know how we're going to survive through it. What are we going to do to survive through it, and why do we have to accept that it's going to be as bad as a lot of people think it is? I guess maybe that's my positive mental attitude coming through. Anyways,
we're shooting for apocalypse, small a.
Yeah, small a
everything
apocalypse
to make it not be big A apocalypse.
Right. All right, guys, we're coming up on 2 hours here, so we're just kind of saying silly stuff at this point. So unlike the rest of the time when we were saying decidedly not silly things. So thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of. Yes, there it is. Oh, a little preview. Yeah, there we go.
I was gonna let you talk over it. I was gonna be outro music.
I don't know if it'll pick up. I can't hear it if I'm talking. I don't know if it'll pick it up. But that's that's a little preview of what our intro outro music is probably going to sound like. And that's my first time actually hearing it. I didn't know he'd actually done it. So, anyways, this has been another episode of King Pilled. If you like the show, please like the show and share it, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Matt at Real King Pilled, Steven at Messina Inc. And we will be we'll go live again on Thursday at 12:30 Pacific, just like today. Until then, take it easy, guys.
Fade to black.